Carlos Santana, born on July 20, 1947, in Autlán de Navarro, Jalisco, Mexico, was a man of deep sorrow, where music and life intertwined into a brilliant and tragic harmony. The greatest sadness in his life was not the failures in his career or the times when the audience turned their backs on him, but the loss of his close brother, Jorge Santana, who passed away in 2020 after a long battle with lung cancer. Jorge was not only a blood brother, but also a musical companion with whom Carlos played the first chords on an old guitar during the poor days in Tijuana. Jorge's death left an unfillable void in Carlos's heart, a wound he felt clearly every time he picked up the guitar, and remembered the evenings when the two brothers sat together, dreaming of a future greater than the dusty streets they had lived on. The pain began in Jorge's final days, when Carlos sat by his brother's hospital bed, holding his hand and listening to his weak breathing. He said that in that moment, he felt as if a part of his soul had died with Jorge. Carlos cried a lot, not in front of his family or the press, but in the dark corners of the house in San Rafael, California, where he lived with his wife, Cindy Blackman. He often stood alone on the balcony, looking out at the night sky, letting his tears fall as he remembered the times Jorge taught him how to play, how to harmonize, and how to turn sadness into melody. He wondered what he could have done differently to keep Jorge if he had been too absorbed in the spotlight and not spent enough time with his brother. That sadness never really left him. It seeped into every note he played, every performance he gave, a reminder that life, no matter how brilliant, always has irreparable losses. Carlos Santana's career journey is a long and tumultuous one, where he has reached dazzling heights and fallen to dark depths. Born into a poor family in Mexico, his father, Jose Santana, was a mariachi musician, while his mother, Josefina, worked hard to support his 7 children. Carlos's childhood was filled with his father's violin, the smell of Autlán's dirt, and the days when his family moved to Tijuana in search of better opportunities. There, he began playing the guitar, learning from his father and older brother Jorge, with his first guitar being a worn-out gift his father bought from a pawn shop. From the noisy streets of Tijuana, Carlos dreamed of a bigger world where his music could be heard. In 1966, at the age of 19, Carlos moved to San Francisco, where he joined the hippie community and began to develop his own unique musical style, a blend of rock, blues, and Latin music. His first success came in 1969, when his band Santana performed at Woodstock, a historic event that catapulted him to international fame. The song Soul Sacrifice, with its blaring guitars and frenetic drums, brought tens of thousands of people to their feet and danced, and Carlos, a poor boy in Mexico, became an overnight musical icon. His debut album Santana, released that same year, peaked at number 4 on the Billboard charts, and he began to be compared to legends like Jimi Hendrix. The 1970s were a golden age. Abraxas, 1970, topped the charts with Black Magic Woman and Oye Como Va. Santana III, 1971, further cemented his status, and he became one of the first Latin rock artists to achieve global recognition. But it wasn't always a bed of roses. In the early 1980s, Santana faced major setbacks. The band fell apart, members left, and audiences began to turn away from his style as punk and new wave took hold. Zebop, 1981, failed to live up to expectations, and Carlos fell into financial trouble as tour revenues dwindled. He once recounted that there were nights after a failed show when he would sit alone in his dressing room, clutching his guitar and crying, feeling helpless. He wondered if he still had a place in the music industry, if his years of dedication would be forgotten. But he didn't give up. He changed his strategy, collaborating with younger artists and experimenting with a new sound, even though he was criticized for selling out his Latin soul. The spectacular comeback came in 1999 with the album Supernatural, a masterpiece that brought ぃkaɾlos back to the top at the age of 52. Featuring collaborations with stars like Rob Thomas, Eric Clapton, and Lauryn Hill, the album sold more than 30 million copies, winning 9 Grammys, including Album of the Year. The song Smooth became a global hit, playing on radio stations, bars, and even the small streets where ぃkaɾlos used to play music for a living. But behind the glory were silent tears. To make Supernatural, ʼkaɾlos worked non-stop, sometimes sleeping only 3 hours a night, and the pressure from the record label exhausted him. One time, he sat in the studio, listened to the demo of Maria Maria, and cried because he remembered Jorge, who had told him that ʼkaɾlos would do miracles if he didn't give up. Another setback that brought him to tears was when the 2008 tour was cancelled due to health problems. ʼkaɾlos had severe back pain from years of non-stop playing, and the doctor warned that he might not be able to perform again if he didn't rest. He stood in front of the band, apologized for not being able to continue, and when he returned home, he sat in the living room, looked at the guitar hanging on the wall, and cried like a baby. But he didn't break down. He focused on recovering, experimenting with new music, and continued performing with the same passion as he had overcome all the difficulties before. Jorge Santana never stopped dreaming of greater achievements. He always wanted to leave a timeless musical legacy, not just with hits, but also with messages of love, peace, and connection between cultures. After Supernatural, he began dreaming of creating an album entirely in Spanish, honoring his Latin roots. The ʼcorazón project, released in 2014, was the first step, with collaborations with artists like Juanes and Gloria Estefan. Although it did not achieve the commercial success of Supernatural, the album was a source of pride for ʼkaɾlos, a way for him to tell the world that he had not forgotten his Mexican roots. He would sit in the studio for hours, tweaking every note, and tell his team, "This is not just music. This is our soul." He also aims to create a charity called Milagro, meaning miracle in Spanish, to support poor children around the world. The foundation was established in 1998 and has so far helped thousands of children get an education, receive medical care, and pursue their dreams. Every time he visits the centers sponsored by the foundation, ʼkaɾlos plays the guitar for the children, looks into their eyes, and remembers his difficult childhood. For him, this is a way to turn sadness into motivation, to let the losses in his life become a light for others. Another aspiration is to be recognized as an artist who changes the world, not only through music, but also through ideas. He dreams of organizing a global music festival where artists from all continents play together, spreading a message of peace. He has attended events such as Live Aid in 1985, and the feeling of being on stage for a great cause has always been a desire of his. He believed that if he achieved this, he would fulfill the promise he made to Jorge, that their music would not only entertain, but heal the wounds of humanity. ʼkaɾlos Santana's love and marriages were a colorful picture, where joy was mixed with indelible sadness. His first marriage was to Deborah Santana, whom he met in 1972 at a performance in San Francisco. Deborah was a strong, intelligent woman who worked in publishing, and ʼkaɾlos was drawn to her depth at first sight. They married in 1973 in a simple ceremony, and Deborah became an indispensable companion in the early years of his career. She worked behind the scenes, managed the finances, and helped him through the difficulties when Santana was in crisis. They had 3 children, Salvador, Stella, and Angelica. And in the early years, their family was a home filled with laughter. But the marriage didn't last. By the 1990s, the pressures of their careers and differences in their outlook on life had driven them apart. Deborah wanted ʼkaɾlos to slow down and spend more time with his family, while he continued to immerse himself in music and touring. They divorced in 2007 after 34 years of marriage, and cáɾlos admitted that he felt guilty for not being able to balance love and passion. The biggest sadness in the marriage wasn't the separation, but the feeling that he had hurt Deborah and his children, who had been his greatest source of inspiration. A second marriage began in 2010 with Cindy Blackman, a talented drummer whom káɾlos met at a gig in 2009. Cindy brought him a new lease of life, strength, passion, and musical chemistry. He proposed on stage at a concert in Illinois, and they married in an intimate ceremony in Hawaii. Cindy was not only his wife, but also his partner, creating beautiful symphony with him. But the sadness of the past still haunted him. He sometimes felt like he could not fully open up to Cindy, as if his heart still had a part left for Deborah and the old memories. Although they lived happily, káɾlos wondered if Cindy truly understood the scars he carried inside. Jorge Santana's 3 children, Salvador, Stella, and Angelica, are an important part of his life, both a source of pride and a source of anxiety. Salvador, born in 1983, inherited his father's musical talent. He became a musician, singer, and producer, with a style that blends rock and jazz. káɾlos often says that the first time he heard Salvador play the piano, he cried because he saw himself in his son. But their relationship was not always smooth. Salvador blamed his father for his years away, and at one point they did not speak to each other for months. káɾlos tried to mend the relationship,